welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph. So a few weeks ago I had the chance to speak to a group of upcoming photographers at the Creative Studio Academy, and I did manage to squeeze in a few clips that I'm going to be using for today's breakdown, so you guys know the unconventional kind of lighting setup that I use to teach my class. And before I went, I did know that they've probably taught them a lot of theory. They've also had certain other people pass through to teach them, things about photography, and I wanted to build on that. So what I wanted to do primarily is to let them know that it is good to know the theory, it is good to know the technical terms when it comes to photography and the lighting and the modifiers and things like that. But I also wanted them to understand that it is art that they're creating at the end of the day, and the way they will use their tools to help them create or craft their art is really going to be unique to them. So I wanted them to know that it's good to know the theory, it's good to know the names of the lighting setups and stuff like that, but the more important thing is to be able to and have the willingness to experiment. So maybe if you're setting up your lights in theoretical terms and it's not giving you the results that you're looking for, feel free to experiment, feel free to move things around. I don't want you to go on set and say that because I've been taught paramount lighting, or I've been taught loop lighting, or I've been taught split lighting, that is what I'm coming to do. You should be able to craft or use that knowledge that you have, and sometimes go in between, and sometimes experiment, and sometimes try new things. And based on certain principles or certain theories that you will be able to craft certain images that will become unique to you. So that's what this video is about. So I did do a lighting setup that is truly unconventional. It's something that I've been experimenting with once in a while, and I wanted to show them that you don't always have to do this 45-degree lighting that is coming up from top down onto your subject, and you don't have to use three-point lighting in the same traditional sense every single time. You should be able to feel free to experiment and use different modifiers of different shapes and sizes and at different positions, doing different things until you're able to craft the shot or the image the way you want. Because at the end of the day, you're creating art, and the art should be unique to you and what you are envisioning. So before I move on, there are a few things that we also did prior to the photo shoot. So for example, I did have the backdrop that I was using for this photo shoot printed for me, because I wanted to make sure that the backdrop that I have is going to be unique to this image that we're creating, and we drew inspiration from the Mona Lisa. If I just wanted to do this by myself, yes, I would have been able to do it, but it might have taken me a longer time, or it might have delayed the process or even lengthened the process. And so I also wanted them to understand that if you're a photographer and you really want your work to be elevated, then it is also good if you're partnering with people that share your vision and will be able to make your work a lot easier. So for example, for this shot, after I imagined the way I wanted it to be, all I did was describe the image I'm trying to create to my friend who's an art director, and she was able to bring up the pieces for the headpiece, for example, and then also go out and source fabric, and even made a corset just for this shot. And then we looked around to find some props and some other pieces that brought everything together. So I wanted them to understand that yes, you will be able to move faster if you're doing things on your own, because you have the vision in your head and you can quickly just go out and go and execute it. But I also wanted them to know that if you do want to have that extra in your image that other people will not consider, then it's really good if you're able to find people who are specialized in certain areas that would help you elevate your work. So for example, if I have a dedicated person who is creating the headpiece or the props that I need for my shots, or hand painting a backdrop, whether it's canvas, or printing a backdrop, or someone who's actually going to be styling the model, making certain clothes that I'm imagining in my head, then I'm always going to have an edge over other people who are just random sourcing. There's no right or wrong way to do this, but I just feel like if you have certain people who are skilled in certain areas coming together, there will always be some elevation in your shot. And that is one thing that I wanted to really hammer down when I was having this session. All right, so let me just quickly move on to the lighting setup and then show you guys how everything came together. So the very first thing that we did was to hang up our backdrop, and based on where the backdrop was, we're now going to move our subject around depending on the framing that looked good for what I wanted to capture, and then I'll be able to sit her down and then set a tone or the basis for where my light positioning is going going to be. So the first thing that I would always ask you to do is pick up your frame. Even before you bring in your lights, pick up your frame and figure out where it's going to look the most flattering for what you're trying to capture. Number two, if you've been following this channel for a while, you know that when I'm doing my lighting setups and I'm doing more than 3 lights, I generally would want to start with my weakest light, especially if they're in different positions in the frame and I want to see exactly what you're doing. Then I would always start with the weakest light and then build a shot up from there. I think it's something similar that I did, but in this case I just wanted to make sure that my my main lights were in a very good ratio before I added my edge lights. I knew that the only light coming from the back was going to be that single edge light, and so if I didn't even start from there and started from my main lights, I would still be able to get the ratios to balance out for me to get the shot that I was looking for. So if I quickly just go on to this image right here, right? So this is one shot of the behind the scenes that I captured, and I want you guys to see what's going on. So don't mind this parabolic in the back. It's not doing anything. It was off. There was no strobing there. It was in the frame, but we just pushed it out because we didn't want to capture that in the shot. You're seeing it in the behind the scenes, but it's not doing anything. If I go to another frame right here, where you can see it, this is not doing anything. So if you see it in the shots, just completely ignore it. But what I want you to pay attention to is going to be the edge light right here, the bounce board right here, our first light, and then our second light. So let me just go back to the other frame so that you guys will see it properly. So let me delete this and create a new one. So this is light 1, which is our edge. This is light 2, which is one of our main lights, and then this is our third light, which is also one of our main lights, but serving more as a fill light. All right, okay, let me start over again. What I did was, after I picked up the frame that I liked, the first thing I did was to set up my main light, which is this light right here. Now that is being modified with a 90 centimeter softbox, and I also have a grid on there. The reason why I put that grid on there is because of the position of that light in relation to my subject, and where it was, I knew that if I didn't have a grid on there, it was going to be spilling across. So there's going to be some light spilling in front of my subject and then some going behind here. Now if it goes behind here, there is a high chance that I will have that spill light on the backdrop, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to control the spill and just focus this light on my subject, and that is why I had that grid on there. I also used a relatively smaller softbox because I also wanted to create some depth and dimension in the shot, and that is what this modifier was going to give me. So it's going to give me some shape, some depth, some texture in terms of the tonality in the image. And then I had my second light, which is a 120 cm softbox, and as you can see, this is way larger than our small rig 90 cm softbox. And what this is doing is just wrapping the light around. So this main light, which is our light 1, is just going to be like almost halfway illuminating our subject, meaning that the other half is going to be in shadow. But I also didn't want that to go so dark because I was trying to create a painterly portrait, and so my second light is just enlarging that main light. And because there's no grid on there, because it's also going to be softer, because it's bigger, it's going to wrap around and create even softer shadows. So that is what these two lights are doing. Now if I combine my first light and my second light, you quickly see that we do have a much larger light source. But then if you have a really big light source and then you bring it really close to your subject, then there is a high chance that you're going to create a very, very soft light, because the larger the light is in relation to your subject, the softer it is going to be. Because we're creating a light which is wrapping around and filling the shadows, now we also have another way of adding depth or cutting a subject out from the backdrop. So if I go onto this image right here, if I go to capture one and show you these two images right here, this is essentially the same shot, right? I shot it twice, but then you quickly see that we do have some darkening in her jaw over here, and that is because of the bounce board that we use. So this bounce board right here is double-sided. So we have a white side and then we have a black side. So when you use the white side, obviously it's going to bounce a soft light back onto your subject and open up the shadows and make everything wrap around and look a lot softer. If you're using the black side, you're not going to be bouncing as much light back onto your subject. You're going to be absorbing that light, and this is going to deepen the contrast or deepen the shadows, which is going to create a darker shadow like you can see in this image right here. Now if I scroll up a little bit and even look at her outfit, you see that we do have some deeper shadows in the outfit as well over here. And over here you can see that we do have the shadows rather open, so you can see the textures in the fabric. You can see that her arm over here has a better illumination. The shadows are softer compared to the one on the right. And if I go all the way down as well to what she was, the platform that she was sitting on, you see that even the brown fabric that we had draped onto the stool is a lot brighter in the image on the left, which had the white bounce board, and then it's darker on the image on the right, which had the black side on there. So sometimes if you're shooting in a small space and you don't have the ability to, you know, add maybe another light source, and you still want to be able to manipulate the shadows or the depth of the shadows, using a bounce board or a V-flat is one essential tool that you can use. You can also use a reflector, you know, the 5-in-1 reflector. So if you have the silver side, the silver is going to bounce a much harsher light back onto your subject and increase the specularity. If you're using a white side, it's going to be a softer bounce. If you're using a black side, you're absorbing light and rather increasing the shadows in your frame. Moving on to our third light, because I knew that all of the light was coming in from this end of the frame and meant that this part was going to go a little bit darker, I essentially wanted to add a bit of separation. So if I go back into Capture One again, and when we were trying to initially figure out, you know, where to position the edge light or even the strength or intensity of that light, you see that I was getting a bit of a flare. And if I zoom in to this area right here, you'll see that the edge light was very harsh, it was very bright, and then we had this flare in the frame, which is taking away from what I was imagining this portrait to be like. But in my next shot, I had now figured out the power level that I wanted that edge light to be at, and then also figured out the position that I wanted it to be at so that it's not spilling, but then it's just adding this beautiful little kiss of light in the frame. And that is something that I like to do to my edge lights. I always don't want it to be immediately prominent in my shot, but I just want that little kiss of light so that there is, you know, if I look at the image, you'll be like, probably, you know, if it's a painterly portrait that you're going for, probably when the painting was happening, you know, there was a large window on the side of the frame when he was painting, but then there was probably like a small, you know, window somewhere else that is throwing that little kiss of light on there, and it just adds a bit of depth to your shot. And so always I would just be more particular with where my edge light is coming from and make sure that I'm positioning it at a point where it's just flattering but not taking attention away from the image. Now, another important thing that I also love in my portraits is catch light. So if I zoom into her face right here, you'd see that we do have some beautiful catch lights in her eyes, which is being created by these two modifiers that I stacked together to create a portrait. And as you can see, we are getting this beautiful wraparound of light around. So you can see that we have a beautiful gradation of light, you know, from one side of the image, and as it goes to the right side, as you're looking at, it's getting a little bit darker. So we do have some depth in there, we do have some shadows. It's not completely flat, because when you're shooting with big light sources like this, there is a very high chance that you're going to create flat looking images, especially if you have the light right in front of your subject or right behind you and you're shooting towards your subject. There is a very high chance that you will lose contrast and create less depth in your shots. So having the light coming in from one direction and, you know, creating some shadows on the opposite side, and I'm also shooting towards the shadow side, just makes her pop off the background. So yeah, so that is it for today's video. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more breakdowns like this, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know what you think about the portrait, you know, how I was able to work or collaborate with other talented artists for us to create this beautiful looking image, from makeup to styling to all the props and accessories, and even the backdrop that we hand printed for this, including the beautiful model that we used. Let me know in the comments down below, and also shout outs to Creative Studio Academy for making this possible. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, leave a comment and I'll catch you guys in the next video.